Okay, with the Corp, A-Rod, and Big Cat, we are talking to a business genius. Is that fair to say?
I mean, I'm humbled by that.
Okay, so it is Michael
accurate,
Rubin.
but-
He is the executive chairman of Fanatics. He is a owner of the 76ers and the Devils. And I wanted to start there because you grew up a Philadelphia sports fan, diehard sports fan, and now you own part of the 76ers. That is like every sports fan's dream. So it's kind of a big macro question, but how did that happen?
You know, for me, the real story of how it happened was actually complete fluke and luck. The person who owned the Flyers and the Sixers lived directly across the street from me, Ed Snyder. Incredible guy. He founded the Flyers. And when I sold my company, GSI Commerce, to eBay, he literally came across the street and said, Michael, you know, I'm not a basketball guy. I'm all about the Flyers. You know, I almost like, I hate basketball. I'm not into this thing. Do you want this team? I'm like, nah, like, it's, you know, it's not for me. It loses a lot of money. I'm not really interested. And then he said, let's just celebrate. And we had, you know, a glass of, you know, bottle of champagne. And that was it. I never thought about it again. And then as things kind of worked themselves out, Josh Harris and David Blitzer put the deal together to buy the team a few months later. And David Stern reached out to me and said, hey, you know, you're interested in this? And I said, oh, you know, it's losing a ton of money and it's too expensive. And I had no idea what I was talking about. None. Zero. When they actually walked me through the numbers, I'm like, oh, wow, this is completely different than I thought. I should have actually asked a few questions when the owner walked across the street and asked me if I wanted it. And I said, yeah, I'm in. And so that's kind of how I got involved. It was not by design. It's not something that I really thought a lot about. And just kind of fell into me not once, but twice. It took 2 times for me to actually pay attention and listen.
Okay, so I actually own a part of the Swansea City.
Yeah.
They're not in the EPL, they're in the Championship League. Alex then is now the only person sitting here who doesn't own a professional sports team. Do you think he should buy one?
I think we talked about this before. I think he'd be an incredible owner. I think he's driven. He works his ass off. He's smart. He'd work every aspect of it. So I think he needs to, and I think he needs to go in it aggressively and do it really well.
You know, it's funny. The one sport that I do own is NRG, which is esports out of San Francisco. I don't know if you can count that, but I guess in the next 5 years we probably will.
Oh, I think you can count that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so...
By the way, I just left Bobby Kotick and came here, and he asked me where I was off to, and I said you were the next person I was seeing in my day, and he said you guys were doing esports together, and how excited he was. But I actually think it's what we're seeing happen there is incredible. I mean, I didn't believe in this a couple years ago, and now one thing about me, when I screw something up, I'll very quickly say I got it wrong, and I'll change. And esports is something we're going after very aggressively at Fanatics now as well.
Yeah, we took a big position on it about 3 years ago, and you know, all the really smart people in my office that are much younger said this is the future. I didn't believe it, but I trust my team, and we made a pretty big bet. And then this past summer, we also got Jennifer involved in a big way, making her the first prominent woman to get involved in esports. So very exciting. I want to ask you a question about the Sixers because you said, and you're one of the best investors I've been around because you really have just a great nose and feel. You know, Buffett calls it a money mind. And I think that's what you have. But when you said the Sixers were losing money and then you saw kind of the spreadsheet, and why did you think they were losing money? And then what about that spreadsheet did you actually like? Was it the trend?
No, so the truth be told, like Fanatics is an incredible opportunity. So when I sold my company to eBay, I bought back 3 businesses that all have enormous opportunity. I was very focused on that. I didn't want to be distracted. And what was in my head was kind of the economics of a basketball team from kind of the previous 5 years. And so most teams at that point, they cost like $400 million to buy. A lot of teams were losing $25 million. This is going back to 08, 09, 010, and so many people have came to me the previous couple of years and said, look, do you want to partner with me to buy the Sixers? So what was in my head was a $400 million purchase price, losing $25 million a year. When the new labor arrangements were being put together and the TV revenue was growing like crazy, I wasn't really thinking about the future model. And to be honest, Ed Snyder, incredible human being, was so passionate about hockey. He wasn't a basketball guy, so he was selling the team because he didn't like it. So he wasn't the guy to say to me, by the way, Michael, you're actually wrong. He's like, yeah, you're right. I don't want you to buy this thing. And it literally, he was like, hey, do you want to buy this? You just sold your company to eBay. And I'm like, yeah, it's $400 million and it loses a lot of money. He's like, yeah, it's a bad business. And the truth be told, that's why he was a seller, because that's the way he felt about it. What Josh Harris and David Blitzer did was, one, they negotiated a much more appropriate price. They paid $265 million for the Sixers in 2011. And by the way, that was, some of that money you borrow from a bank, some of it you actually write a check for. And then on top of that, with where labor was going and with where television was going, they had a much better sense of what this business was going to look like financially. And as soon as I understood that, it took me all of about 5 minutes to say, I'm in. And it was, to be honest, it was an incredible investment. I didn't do it necessarily for the investment. I did it because ultimately I have aspirations to be a, control owner, in sports. I thought it would be a great way for me to learn the business. And, I'm now the third largest shareholder of both the Sixers and the Devils, and it's been a great experience, great group of people. I think everyone, really adds value to the organization. And I've learned a tremendous amount from it. And I think in a lot of ways, I've used the Sixers and the Devils to help make Fanatics a better company because you find out what fans want and you use that to make a better experience for your fans. I think Fanatics has helped us to make the Sixers and Devils a better business as well because you're always learning from sports businesses. How do you treat a fan better and how do you kind of run a better business?
So you get presented with the offer, and I'm always interested in this with like successful business people. Do you consider yourself a cynic at first when you look at something like someone says, "Hey, look, I have this idea, I have this deal"?
I'm probably an optimist. Like I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. Like I'm always a happy person. I always believe the best in things. So I'm not, look, I have a pretty good nose. Like if you'd say, like I barely made it out of high school, I didn't go to college. Street smarts is what kind of I'm good at. So I've got a pretty good sniffer for like what's right and what's wrong. And I just, with the Sixers the first time, the person who was selling it had such a bad perspective of what he felt about the business. I didn't ask the right questions and I didn't do any work because I wanted to be laser focused on my 3 companies. The second time I got it within a minute, literally it was like, oh, it's cost $135 million less. Oh, it loses a lot less money. Oh, here's what the economics look like going forward. So it was pretty easy to figure out. So I'd say in general, I ask really quick questions and I think I'm pretty quick to figure out whether something makes sense or not. But I'd say I'm generally an optimist and that's what's made me the type of entrepreneur that I am.
Has that ever burned you? Where
Definitely.
you say, well, give us an example of something that you looked at it and you're this is going to be huge.
This could be the longest podcast ever. We went through all the things I've screwed up in my life. I mean, look, you're talking about a guy, and people don't know that. A lot of people don't really know this about me. I've nearly gone bankrupt like 5 times in my life. I mean, I started as an entrepreneur when I was 8 years old. I opened a ski shop in my parents' basement when I was 12. By the time I was 16. It didn't snow one season, and I literally had $200,000 of bills and $80,000 of inventory, and the sheriff became like a really good friend of mine because every day in the springtime, she came and she dropped the daily lawsuits off at my parents' house. I probably got sued 100 times one spring and summer from running the ski business. Wow. So, when you go through experiences like that, like you've seen great times and you've seen tough times, and each time you almost fail, you fail, generally leads to something much better. And for me, what was interesting was I found myself at 16 years old, $200,000 in debt, literally probably 100 lawsuits that I received over a couple months from all these ski vendors I owed money to.
How'd you pay it off?
Well, that's a great question. That's where I'm going. So I hired a bankruptcy lawyer, and it was all over. Like I was done. I was going bankrupt. And the guy says, by the way, how old are you? I said, I'm 16. He said, what? I said, yeah, I'm 16. He says, well, you have to be 18 to be legally able to owe the money. He says, I think we have a good little angle. This is going to be better for you than you thought. So, I'd never borrowed any money from my parents. I'd started this all on my own, and I grew up in a very middle-class family. And the lawyer said, look, I think we could settle these debts. Why don't we get all the vendors together? And they get all these vendors that owed money together. And, they said, Mr. Rubin owes you $200,000. And, unfortunately, he's not able to pay you. He's only got $80,000 of inventory. And everyone's talking very hard about how I'm going to go bankrupt. They said, by the way, he's 16 years old. And everyone's face turned colors. Oh and they said, how about we pay you 18 cents on the dollar? And they said, okay, that would be fine. No negotiation. Sure, pays the 18 cents on the dollar. I went to my father for the first time. I said, Dad, I need to borrow money. And my dad said, look, that's a lot of money. It was $38,000. He said, I'll lend you the money on one condition, that you promise that you're going to go to college. And so, doing what any entrepreneur would do, of course, I yesed him to death. He said, absolutely, Dad, I'm in. I'm ready for college. I've completely failed in business, and let's go. And so he lent me the $38,000. And then, fortunately for me, and unfortunately for my parents, like a week later, there was another ski shop that went bankrupt. It had $250,000 of inventory. And they got auctioned off for $13,000. So, of course, I bought it.
Oh, but get back in.
But I know ability how to pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay, like paying for it was a whole different question. So I went to my dad. I'm like, I didn't even ask my mom because I knew that was a hard no. So I went to my dad. I said, Dad, can I borrow $13,000, this is such a great deal. He said, no, like I lent you money one time, you come in to go to college, you're shutting this business down next year when you graduate high school, it's over. So I literally started going to neighbors. I found a neighbor who said, I'll lend you the $13,000. I want $1,000 a week interest.
Wow.
That's some juice.
So seemed like a great deal to me. So I said, great, let's go. So instead of selling the merchandise piece by piece, at retail in my store, I started going through the yellow pages to find other ski shops that could sell it in bulk. And I was able to sell maybe 10% of the inventory for more than the $13,000 within 3 weeks. And that actually led me to get in the business of buying and selling closeout footwear. By the time I was 21, I was doing $100 million, making $10 million a year. The reason I tell you this story is here I am, 16 years old, almost bankrupt, near-death experience, and then I just fall into somebody else who went bankrupt. I get a loan shark to lend me the money to buy the inventory, and a couple years later, I'm doing $100 million and making $10 million a year in the closeout business. So to me, failing is kind of how to me, every failure generally leads to your next success, and I actually don't mind it. I kind of like it in a sort of way. So when you talk about kind of attitude and like, am I negative? No, I believe I can will anything to happen. I believe I can make anything happen I set my mind to.
100 million gross from how many stores?
Well, when I was in the closeout business, what I did was instead of selling it at retail, I started buying excess footwear. So I go to Fila and buy all their excess shoes. I go to Asics and buy all their excess shoes. And I was buying 10 million pair of shoes a year and selling them to retailers like Modell's and Sports Authority and TJ Maxx and Marshalls and Ross stores and Famous Footwear. And it was an easy business. I was a one-man shop with a warehouse, and I
It's
just
eBay before eBay.
yeah, except for it was in bulk because I was selling to other retailers instead of to consumers.
That's unbelievable. So
But I'm definitely an optimist.
yes, I mean I always wonder that because it's always I'm an optimist, but I'm also a terrible gambler, and that probably like if I was more of a cynic, I might be a better gambler. So I'm curious, someone who's successful.
Well, generally casinos win in gambling, so generally.
Yeah, well, I know that. That's a whole other podcast.
You're generally going to be bad gambling because it generally doesn't
We
work
could do hours on that. So V-commerce, I know what it means. I don't think you know what it means, so explain it to me.
Sure. Well, I hope we know what it means because I hope we kind of invented what V-commerce is today. Look, we had a really simple belief. When I sold my company in 2011 and I bought back Fanatics from eBay, it was essentially the Zappos of licensed sports merchandise. So we had this incredible assortment of licensed sports merchandise. But I had one fundamental belief when I bought the company back in 2011, and it was that there were two companies that were going to own retail in the whole world. And that was Amazon and Alibaba. Essentially, my belief was these two companies were taking over all of retail. And by the way, I believed that 5 years earlier because I just looked back at a presentation I gave in 2005 to all of our retailers at my old company, GSI Commerce. And at that point, Amazon was about $25 billion. And I projected them to be the biggest retailer in the world over time. And people told me I was nuts when I said this. Like, they're successful. They'll never be the biggest retailer in the world. And so my belief is if Amazon and Alibaba are essentially selling commonly available merchandise in their marketplaces, and they're the two companies that have taken over the world, to win in e-commerce, you have to be completely differentiated, or you can't win. So in other words, if you're trying to take the same stuff that Amazon sells, the same stuff that Alibaba sells, and sell it, then you're essentially going to go out of business eventually because they're going to kill you because they're both that good. So my belief was you need to be completely differentiated. So for us, what v-commerce means is kind of vertical commerce. It means we design and develop the merchandise and sell it directly to the consumer. So this year when the Eagles won the Super Bowl and they were putting on the Super Bowl t-shirts, that's a t-shirt that we design. You could only buy it exclusively from us, and we sell it directly to the consumer. And you'd say the same thing today. We own Majestic, the baseball uniform company. And we design, develop, and sell that merchandise directly to the consumer. So today, most of what we sell at Fanatics is products that we design, develop, and sell directly to the consumer. So think about H&M or Zara or The Gap. These are big vertical retailers. What we essentially did was do it in the sports business, but we've done it really with an e-commerce foundation versus a brick and mortar foundation.
Interesting. I think I get it.
Fantastic.
I could pass the test afterwards.
There'll definitely be a test. By
Yes, absolutely.
Robert Kraft. I know how good buddies you guys are. First of all, how did the relationship, everywhere I go, and Robert is, a dear friend of mine and one of my mentors as well, love him. How'd you guys meet? How'd you become so close? And it's funny, when people see you together all the time, I get a bunch of my friends say, are they really good friends? I'm like, yeah, they're like brothers.
Well, first of all, I'm like 46 and I act like I'm 25. Robert's 77, he acts like he's like 22. So actually for his recent birthday, someone got the two of us T-shirts that said "Big Bro" for me and "Little Bro" for him. So he's definitely less mature of the two of us, and that's actually saying a lot. So Robert, it's the way we met was actually pretty ironic in that Robert's oldest son, Jonathan Kraft, who's also one of my closest friends, very hands-on in running the Patriots and really understands technology and their kind of all aspects of technology, particularly their e-commerce business, and Jonathan was hammering on the NFL about things that he didn't like that we were doing with NFL Shop that we own and operate. So after he beat up the NFL so many times, there was someone at the NFL who finally said, just let me get the two of you together so I can kind of get out of the middle of this. And Jonathan came to me and said, like, look, I think you're doing these following things that are really stupid. I looked at him, I listened to him, I said, yeah, you're right. They make no sense. I get it. You're right. Thank you, by the way. And so that's kind of how we met. So Jonathan became a really good friend of mine. And then just over time, Robert and I also became very friendly. I consider Robert now, he's one of my closest guy friends. We're together all the time. We just were in Vegas last weekend. He came out for my birthday, and
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
I said it first.
I'm embarrassed to admit.
You work for me, so be quiet.
That's true. That's it. It counts for him.
Yeah, good. On his behalf, of course. Robert stayed out till 4 o'clock in the morning. It was impressive. And by the way, which was 7 o'clock East Coast time, and he was going strong. I'm like, Robert, I'm tired. He's like, yeah, but we're having so much fun. Why do we need to go to bed?
So what did you guys do? You're a diehard Eagles fan. You're going to make so much money off the Eagles winning the Super Bowl because they never won one in your Fanatics business. You're sitting watching the game with Robert Kraft.
Yeah, so for me, this was really easy. Robert, as I said, is really one of my closest guy friends. To me, it's always family first. And we had a company we have 5,500 full-time employees at Fanatics. 5,500, because I'm actually not an employee of the company. We're definitely rooting for the Eagles. I was 100% with all of my heart rooting for the Patriots. And, and Jeffrey Lurie is also, a friend of mine, and I love him. But, Robert's family and Jonathan's family and the Crafts have treated me like family. So I was rooting for them, and I was really pissing off a lot of people along the way. I was getting hate DMs and hate email and hate text messages, and I probably should have just kept my mouth shut. But to me, I'm transparent. I say what I think.
So when the game ends, though, are you like, man, I'm so sorry, Robert, Jonathan, this is terrible. I can't believe they lost. Then you slide in the bathroom. You're like, hey, how are sales going?
No, actually, worse than that. The real story is I got in the car with Robert and his girlfriend and myself and my girlfriend. It was just the four of us. We got in the car, and there was not a lot of talking for the first minute, so I really just tried to be a comedian and be funny. I talked about different locations we could go to that we'd never come back to Minneapolis again. It was awkwardly cold, and no one needed to be here. So I was just trying to be funny. I did not look at sales. I figured they were going to be good.
Somewhere in your head, the businessman, the 16-year-old who went bankrupt once.
Fanatics, Fanatics is a $2.3 billion company this year. The outcome of the Super Bowl has not changed anybody's lives. I was, a lot more concerned about trying to change the topic for Robert.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So I was with him that night. I was very awkward to watch that, and it was such a demoralizing defeat. But obviously,
well, let me tell you what else was really awkward. Sorry for cutting you off. This time it's widely known. Meek Mill is another one of my really close friends, and Meek had spoke to Robert because he was in prison at this point the morning of the game, and Meek is a diehard Eagles fan, but also loves Robert, and during the game, all the Eagles played was Meek's music. And literally every song the Eagles played, every song was Meek's music. Rob looks at me, he's like, I fucking hate Meek. I'm sick and tired of him. Like literally, I don't ever want to hear his voice again.
Yeah.
So you talked about Jonathan being so smart, and tell me one lesson that you've learned from Robert when it comes to real life, and then one lesson that you learned perhaps in business, because I've never met someone that's got it right in both sides.
Yeah, so I could give you a lot of really good examples. The first thing I think I've learned from Robert is I've always wanted to make everybody, like I believe like I'm building a business brick by brick, and I think relationships are really important, and I think you want to treat everyone really well. And the way I watch their family treat people, they make everybody feel special. And that's just the way, and they really feel that way. They're built that way. And so I'd say the way that they handle difficult situations is really admirable. I'd say I've been a little bit more, and I'm pretty controlled, but I'd say I'd be a little bit more like bull in a china shop, where the Kraft way and really Robert's way is always to take things in a much, calmer way and to just be more thoughtful and kind of not lose your mind on something. And look, I lived through Deflategate with these guys, and I watched the way he handled that. I knew how much it was eating him up inside, but at the same time, I saw the way he made sure that he always wanted to put the league first and the way he dealt with it, and he didn't let he compartmentalized it really well. So there's been many talks we've had. If I've been in a intense negotiation with the league, and I've been more temperamental, and Robbie just like, hey, take a deep breath. So I'd say stylistically, you couldn't learn from someone with a better style how they deal with people and how they make people feel. And look, Robert's way is just, and again, it's the Kraft way, is to make everybody feel great. And that goes so far in business because you know what? Here's what I learned. When you start a business, everybody's rooting for you. When you make a business much bigger, people start rooting against you. I've seen it already. When we were $250 million, everybody wanted to help us. Now, at $2.3 billion, and I feel like we're still a little baby company with so much growth ahead of us, everyone's coming at us. And so for me, knowing that you want to make as many friends as you can along the way is I think, a really great approach. And I say that's the biggest thing I've learned from him is just how to treat people and how to have everybody possible on your side.
Did you consult with him at all when the Brian Colangelo stuff happened?
We did.
So what was that discussion like? I mean, obviously that was an awkward situation for everyone involved.
Yeah, look, first of all, if you're in any public business, and there's no more public business than sports ownership, that's the most public company in the world, you have lots of awkward situations. I'm thinking, Alex could give us...
I'm the king of it.
Right.
Yep.
You could, and by the way, and what's really great about you is how you've navigated difficult, awkward situations and turned them into positives. So we actually, I actually, without getting into the details, I called Robert multiple times about it to get his perspective, and I also, Josh and I called with Robert to get his perspective. Look, he's the most winning owner in modern sports history. He's one of my, literally, I talk to him, multiple times a day, every day. It would be insane for me not to pick his brain about, the situation.
Right. Was that a shock, like when that all happened? I mean, it was a shock for everyone.
I found out, the way I found out about it was really a shock. I was actually in my apartment in a meeting with Meek and with somebody else. We were actually talking about some important world issues, and I wasn't picking my phone up, and Joel Embiid FaceTimed me like 17 times. And literally, I finally, I'm like, what do you want? He's like, and that's why I found out from him. So that's how I found out. I didn't actually, we all find out at the same time. And Joel is a troll on social media.
Yeah.
He's glued to his phone. So
Right.
he was my source of information.
The last question about this. Did you have any issues with Colangelo's collars? They were a little big.
Listen, you're talking about a guy who dresses pretty poorly on my end. So,
Yeah, but they were a little big. They were a little big.
Listen,
Collars
I can live with. I'm all about results. I don't care what you look like.
Okay,
Just
that's
give me the-
fair. That's
give
a
me the
fair
results.
answer. Would you have a burner account if Twitter started when Alex Rodriguez was a rookie? Do you think you would have a burner account to go back at the haters?
I don't know about when I was a rookie, but maybe like during my suspension, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, I was waiting for you to answer that. I was going to say, definitely, he knows not to now.
Yes.
Then he definitely would have
Yeah.
for sure.
Like it's a
great idea.
and it's also, I mean, you dealt with it obviously as a professional athlete in the spotlight. Sometimes it feels like you can't get your voice out there. Sometimes you can't. You feel like people are kind of twisting everything that's said, and you just want to kind of unload with a burner account.
Yeah, it's good to unload.
Yeah, yeah.
I got to tell you my craft story, and it's a brief one. I haven't told you, Dan. But in the middle of my suspension in 2014, it was like the most miserable and yet the most important time of my life professionally. And I saw it like, okay, I can either fall off the cliff or I can actually build and just, try to be respectable again. And I ran into Robert Kraft, and, what better guy to run into when you're in a problem? And Robert and I just got in a corner. We were having a drink. And he says, Alex, you're a good guy. You've made some mistakes, and you're not handling this well. You have people around you that are burning bridges, and you need to start building bridges. And I went home that night. I wrote it down. I put it in my wallet. And from that day forward, things changed. And about a month ago, I showed Robert this, and he just had a big smile on his face. So Robert's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
And by the way, that's a perfect example of what he does every day. And even there's every day he's working on a different big issue to make the world a better place. And whether it's something in the sports media landscape or whether it's something in related to, today what's happening with the anthem, or whether it's, a business issue. I mean, he's grinding every day, making the world a better place.
So Fanatics, what's the future for Fanatics? Like, where is it? You guys are doing, I think I read something about a big deal with Nike.
Yeah, so Fanatics it's funny. People look at the company as it's gone from $250 million to $2.3 billion in the last 7 years, and people look at it as, wow, it's a big company. I feel like we're still in the second inning of the game. So for us, we believe we will be, we've kind of invented the kind of what vertical commerce, or what we call v-commerce is. We think the sports vertical alone gets to be a $10 billion business within the next decade. So we think it's huge growth ahead in sports for Fanatics. In addition, we think the same model in other categories could make a lot of sense, whether it's entertainment, music. The same kind of verticalized commerce model is really interesting. So I'm incredibly bullish on the business. And on top of that, I'm having a blast with it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Are you the leak to Darren Ravel? He gets all the Fanatics.
No.
He has the T-shirt before anyone else. Are you the leak?
It's the guy with the mayor.
You're the leak?
He'd be the leak.
Give me some of those scoops.
Yeah,
I'm sick of him beating me.
Yeah,
I actually beat him once a year. I don't know who. I think Nike makes it.
We
You
can
probably
give you, if you need a leak once a year,
Yeah.
Mayor can hook you up.
The Final Four shirts. I beat him like 4 years in a row, and he would get so upset. I had one guy in I don't even know where he was. He would send me an email.
If you agree to no other leaks get leaked.
One leak.
If we can limit this to one leak a year, I think we can make a deal right now.
He gets all the leaks. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
We got a deal for one leak, and then you embargo the rest that we screw up.
Yes, perfect.
Fine, done.
Perfect.
You got a deal.
Perfect.
Mike, so you talk about, so I see you in three buckets, and talking about investments. For me, I see you in three buckets, which is Fanatics and obviously your life running that business. Then you have your basically holding company with, Blitzer and Josh with your sports franchises. Where is that third bucket? You talked about Amazon. If you had $100 and you said you have to invest it in the market for the next 5 to 10 years, how do you split that $100?
Well, first of all, for me, let me say that the way I think about it is I own 3 consumer e-commerce businesses, Fanatics, Rule of Law and Guilt, and then ShopRunner. And those 3 companies have enormous upside. All 3 private companies, I own between half and all of the, depending on which company it is. So I'm really focused on growing those 3 businesses. In addition, I have a significant stake, as I mentioned, in the Devils and the Sixers. So outside of that, I actually don't do a lot of investing because for me, the lesson I've learned is focus is everything. And I think the biggest thing that I screwed up at my old company, I think, we sold the company for $2.4 billion, but had I not screwed this up, it would have been worth many times that. We did too many things not well enough. So for me, what I do is I actually have someone who runs my family office, and they make kind of all of my investments other than things in hey, there's a one-off, hey, I like you, you've got this good situation, we'll look at it quickly, and yeah, we'll do it. But I'm generally, 90% of my investable money is actually run by professionals. I don't pay attention to it because in the grand scheme of things, I'm completely focused on Fanatics, Rule of Law and Guilt, and ShopRunner, and also the stake in the Sixers and the Devils, because that's where the real value creation for me is. That said, certainly in this environment, I'm definitely an internet guy. So I think, as much as Amazon's a company I obsess about, and for reasons that they kill most retailers, look, I love Amazon and Alibaba's investments. I think they're both great. Big fan of Facebook. Even though I look at, even though they took a big hit last week, I'm a big fan of kind of the growth that they're going to have. So, I would probably invest in consumer internet businesses, and my top of the list would be Alibaba, Amazon, Facebook, Google. I think they're going to be all better than average returns.
You big on Netflix?
Yes, I like Netflix. Okay. Yeah.
Do you think Amazon's going to start like a world government and take over all of us?
No, because
Did you see the robot dogs?
I think they're too smart because I
Okay.
think they want to stay out of politics as much as possible.
Did you see the robot dogs?
Yeah.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I have dreams. I haven't had none of the drones or robots.
Yeah, the drones everywhere.
They haven't entered my dreams yet, fortunately.
Oh man, that's going to be, I just keep an eye on that. The drones and the robot dogs. You mentioned Meek Mill earlier.
Yeah.
How did that relationship start? He kind of took everything by storm. He comes out of jail, goes right to the Sixers game. There was obviously a huge. Everyone was playing his music at the Eagles championship parade and everything. How did that entire relationship start?
So Meek, was somebody I met randomly 5 years ago at an NBA All-Star game. He was with his now ex-girlfriend Nicki Minaj. I was with my daughter. We were sitting next to each other. And my daughter really is like, if you grow up in the sports business, nothing really phases you. But she was like the one person at that point in her life, she loved Nikki in that moment. And so she's kind of annoying Nikki and just chatting her up like crazy. And I'm trying to control her as good as possible. And Meek's like, wait a second, you're Rubin, you're the Sixers guy, right? And immediately he started just bombarding me with business questions. I loved it because it was just like me. It was like, I had no idea who he was. I'm like, you know, what do you do? He's like, I'm a rapper, and he's telling me a little bit of a story. But I had no idea who he was, and he's like asking me like, how'd you make this deal? How'd you do that? It was like just the same type of personality, the sponge that I am, he was. And I'd say, you know, the first year, like, you know, he would come to games with Nikki, I'd host them, but we were friendly, but, you know, we didn't really talk on the phone much. You know, maybe I saw him 10, 15 times the first year. And then we just got more and more friendly. You know, he lived 10 minutes from my house. And, you know, before any of the really negative stuff happened with him being sent to prison, he had become one of my 5 closest friends. You know, by the way, we always talk about now the time that, you know, last summer, you know, I brought Robert to the All-Star game in Miami for baseball, and I brought Meek and Joel. So that we all went to the All-Star game together. And that's actually how Meek and Robert met for the first time, which, you know, Robert was pretty helpful in everything that happened with Meek. But he had become one of my closest friends. So for me, what was a life-changing experience, and one that I would encourage everyone to have because I didn't believe it was possible, he used to always tell me about this crazy legal situation and about this crazy judge. And you know what? Everyone tells you their problems. And you know, Alex, I'm sure you could tell me this. From people you like, you hear people's problems every day, and most of them go in one ear and out the other because there's not enough hours in the day to think about something. And you know, for me, someone's like, "Hey, this is happening. Okay, I'll send you a check." Like that's the way I like to solve problems. And last summer, he was around all the time, and I kept saying to him, like, "Dude, like, what's the matter with you? Like, go get a job. Like, I don't like go perform. I don't get it. Why are you not performing?" He's like, "Michael, like, I know you're some Jewish white kid from the suburbs, but you don't understand. I'm on probation. Like, you're not allowed to leave." I'm like, "What do you mean? Your job is to perform. How can you not leave?" He's like, "I'm not allowed." Like, something's not right here. You can't not be allowed to go, you know, perform.
Right.
And so at that point, I started getting involved. I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. Like, he's my boy. He's at my house all the time. Like, this kid, like, here's a kid who could be making, you know, tens of millions of dollars a year, and he can't travel. And so I started getting involved with the lawyers before anything went wrong, and started asking all these questions. And the first thing, you know, we heard was that, you know, he was a model probationer. Everyone thought he was great. By the way, he always told me from day one, and this is what's so crazy. I remember when we were sitting on the basketball court, he said, "Michael, I was charged for pointing a gun at a cop." He said, "If a black kid points a gun at 10 cops, that's called suicide. You don't get to point a gun at multiple cops like, 'Oh, I'm sorry, sir, can you put your gun down?'" Like, they kill you. That's what they're trained to do. So he always told me he never pointed the gun. That's what he was ultimately sent to jail for and been stuck in this whole legal situation for. So I tried to help get his probation terminated. He'd been on probation for 10 years already. And the judge called a probation hearing. And she called a probation hearing for 2 what you call technical violations. The first was that he popped a wheelie in New York City, and he put it on Instagram. And a day later, 20 cops show up at a charity basketball function and arrest him for reckless endangerment because they saw it on Instagram, okay? Now, by the way, only because he's a black rapper did he get arrested for popping a wheelie on Instagram. Would never happen to anybody else. So also, earlier that year, he had a friend of his who was jumped in an airport where he was traveling. They had just done a concert, and his friend got jumped, and he went to go help him. And of course, who they arrest? The black rapper. And then they look at all the video surveillance and realize that actually it was 2 people that worked in the airport who jumped his friend because Meek wouldn't take a picture with him earlier that morning. And they then dropped all the charges against Meek. And so those 2 things, which resulted in all charges being dropped in both cases, were enough for the judge to bring him in on a technical probation violation. And so I decided at the last second, he was so nervous, he kept calling me about it. I'm like, "I'm gonna come with you." I just canceled my day. And it was like a fluke. I went with him, Monday, November 6th. And I go in the courtroom, and I thought it was gonna be like 15 minutes. First, they take your phone away. Like, you're taking your phone away in the middle of the day is like,
That has to kill you.
By the way, I was like, first of all, I was like crawling out of my skin.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think this is gonna be 15 minutes. And judge gets up, and the probation officer comes up first. She goes, "Robert Williams, he's a model probationer. He's done everything we asked. We recommend no sentence." The district attorney gets up next, says, "We recommend no sentence." I turn around to the lawyer. I'm like, "Why are we here?" He's like, "Listen, in the history of Philadelphia, No one's ever been sentenced. When the probation officer and DA recommends no sentence, you never get sentenced. So now this thing's gone on for like 3 hours. This 15-minute thing's gone on 3 hours. We're like at halftime. They give you a break. You can, go,
Snacks.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It's beer in the middle of the day, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they come back into session, and I tell Meek, like, you're good. Don't worry about it. So she gets up. She says, I'm sentencing you. I'm like, wait, what's the sentence? Like, huh? So like, Michael, can you speak? So I get up and I basically talk about what I've done in the state of Pennsylvania, the companies I've built. We created tens of thousands of jobs at my old company. We just bought Majestic, which has a big plant in Pennsylvania, and all the employees' jobs that we saved, and my involvement with the Philadelphia Sixers. And then I talk about my relationship with Meek, and how well he knows my daughter, my mom, how he's been to the All-Star game and spent time with Rob Manfred, and how he's spent time with many of the commissioners and all my friends and Robert, and basically this is a guy who I think can unite people in a world where people are being divided. And we need to help this guy to make an impact in the world in a positive way, not break his life down. And I'm giving what I thought was a pretty good speach, like a Jerry Maguire
crushing
speech.
it, yeah.
I mean, to myself, I was crushing it.
Right.
She wouldn't make eye contact with me.
Oh my God.
And part of me is I'm ready to say hello, lady, look
My
up.
eyes are up here, yeah.
Hello,
Yeah,
but I'm in her courtroom. I'm going to play by her rules. So I sit back down. She never looks at me, and the whole tone during this what was 5 or 6 hour session was unfathomable. I'll never be able to explain it to you. You'd have to be in the courtroom to see how she conducts herself. And then she sentences him to 2 to 4 years in state prison. And literally his eyes turn pink, and basically he'll never want to admit this because he's a rapper. Basically his eyes turn pink, and tears start coming out of his eyes. I have the same reaction. And I was randomly sitting next to Desiree Perez, who I had never met, from Rock Nation. I looked at her, I said, I'm not stopping until this guy's out of prison, period, end of story. She introduces herself, she goes, I'm not stopping. And literally, that was a life-changing moment for me. And I literally, between Des and myself, we probably spent a third of our time in the next, between November 6th and April 24th when he was released, on working on getting him out of jail. Because what happened was so wrong. And you know what? If you told me the story about your friend, I'd say, yeah, it's really fucked up. But for it to happen to one of your closest friends,
right.
I've worked too hard in my life and accomplished too much to sit back and watch that happen to one of my closest friends. So I just said, you know what? Work's important, but it's not that important. This is this is part this has to come first.
Wow.
That's a fantastic story. All right,
Depressingly fantastic.
Yeah, I mean that's.
I don't think we
I
can do it better.
I didn't really know any of that
By
stuff.
the way, no
Right.
one did. I'll tell you one other really quick story. My daughter came home that night, and she's at that point she was 11, and she said to me, she walked in the house, and I'm always happy. I'm just an optimistic, always happy person. She said, hey, Dad. Hey, Kyle, what's up? She goes, she looked at me. She goes, what's the matter? I said, oh, no, everything's good. She knew Meek had the hearing that day. What happened to Meek? I'm like, it wasn't good. She says, Dad, I know what the internet is. Answer my question. What happened to Meek? I'm like, he got put in jail. She's like, what? And then she's like, Dad, you have to solve this. You have to fix this. And then she came to my room at 2:30 that morning. She's like, Dad, I had a bad nightmare. I'm like, what's the matter? She goes, well, I dreamed I was failing to school and I got sent to jail. I'm like, well, that could happen. I mean, that could definitely happen to you, so you should take school seriously.
Yeah.
But and here's my 12-year-old, at that point, 11-year-old daughter so affected by this. So it was it bothered us in such a fundamental way.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna wrap up with a quick rapid fire. So I like to do I'm gonna shoot a few things at you. You can answer them quickly. You went to Villanova for a week.
It was actually a few weeks.
A few weeks.
Yes.
Do you flex on people about Villanova winning basketball championships? Do you go around saying
Don't care.
We won?
Don't care. No, not in the slightest.
Okay.
No.
Sure? Never?
Not once.
All right.
Not once. Even more so, I only care about who makes us the most money, other than when the Patriots or the Sixers play. Then I'm all about family first. And
Yes. I ask, what's you obviously made a lot of money. What's the biggest thing you've spent money on that you're like, this is kind of a waste, but I'm going to do it?
Well, I wouldn't want to answer that question, but because the everything becomes public eventually, I'd say it'd be the apartment I just bought in New York City.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. How much money do you have in your wallet right now?
I don't know exactly.
Can I have some money?
Sure.
Okay.
Do you want what's in my wallet?
Gary Vee gave me $830.
So, you want me to
Put
empty
it out there. This is actually the whole idea behind this podcast. Get out of here. The whole idea behind this podcast was just to
It's a
see if I
revenue
can hit
generator.
up a bunch of people for money, and that was none of this is actually ever going to air. I'm just taking people's
Perfect.
money.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good source of income.
That's how much a billionaire has in his pocket
That's
at all
ridiculous.
times.
Yeah. You're going to keep that.
That's like a
You're going
gambling.
to keep that. Did you ever, at any point, stop trusting the process?
Never once.
Never. Even when Sam Hinkie sent his resignation, and you're like, what the hell?
I always, look, I'm a long-term business builder, and I knew we had to build this we were stuck in the middle, and I knew we had to build this the right way long-term. I always believed.
Okay. All right. Flyers versus Devils. You're not a Flyer. I mean, you're
Devils, for sure.
Okay. Because I mean, you just did Patriots
who are
versus
the Flyers?
Eagles. What?
Who are the Flyers?
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. That's fair. Last question. Did you when the well, actually, no, you already answered because you're rooting for the Patriots.
Definitely.
Yeah. But you did check the numbers, right?
I didn't look that night.
But you checked the next day.
They were good, by the way.
But they were strong. They were
By the
strong.
way,
They
it was
were
like it
very
was like
good.
$100
They
million
were
in
very
revenue.
good.
So
Yes.
I mean, it was like the best consolation prize you could possibly get, but it was still really depressing.
Yes.
Mike, so first of all, I want to thank you so much. I know we've become close friends and look forward to continuing our friendship. But more importantly, you've become the gold standard in business. But what I'm most impressed of, number one, you're an amazing father. And number two, stories like you've done with Meek really shows really what's your backbone, what's your DNA. And obviously, both of your parents were doctors that did a great job raising you. So thank you for
Hey, thank you very much. I'm
Yes.
honored to be here with you
Thank
guys
you.
today and love what you guys are doing. And, you know, as I said to you last time we were together, to me, to watch what you did in sports was amazing. But to watch what you've done post-sports is that much more amazing because I love to see someone who kills it in multiple industries. And I got to tell you something, to kill it as an athlete is only thousands of the 7 billion people can do it, but to do what you're doing in business and in life is even more impressive. So,
Thank you, Mike.
And then the compliment for me.
I mean,
Do I get one or no?
you're a great assistant.
Okay, thank
you're a
you.
great
Appreciate
assistant to
that.
Alex. And,
Appreciate
you know,
that.
You look good in the big cap.
Yeah, there we go.
for sure.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'll take that. Yeah,
For sure.
appreciate it.
And I like your revenue generation plan. I think if you-
Yeah, just hitting people up for
But
money.
what you got to do, I think the big learning from this is if you try to pick the right people,
Yeah.
well, you got to just get rappers on the show.
It's-
By the way, Meek was in my office yesterday. I kid you not. I could give you one last funny story. Meek was in my office yesterday, and we were actually doing my first podcast ever on it's called Wrongful Conviction. And as we're doing it, I see Meek has $20,000 fall out of his pocket, and we're looking and the money's all over.
We gotta get him on the show.
What time? When can Meek come on?
The money's all over the floor. So
We
I
gotta
think
make that call.
The
My
moral
guy.
of the story is, I'll see if I can get him out.
Yeah.
And we'll load him up.
him and Robert both. We want him on.
Love it. All
No,
right.
Robert's got
bud.
20s. He's not the right guy.